everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of The Link, which is the podcast here at UAFS's BCM. This is a podcast where we are attempting to connect students with 3 groups of people or ideas. That first group are personalities that here at UA Fort Smith who are interested in student success. The second area is getting students connected with local churches. And the third one is talking about theological topics, having discussion about that. Today, we're going to be tackling one of that first category with the personality here at University of Arkansas Fort Smith. Before we get to that, my name is Lee Woodmansee. I'm the campus minister here at the BCM at UA Fort Smith. And this is a new venture for us, but I want to go ahead and introduce John Martini. John, tell us about who you are.
Well, I'm John Martini. I'm an assistant professor in electronics technology and robotics and sustainable technology here at the University of Arkansas Fort Smith, and I'm also the BCM advisor for this campus as well.
Rock on. So that's how we have a connection with John. But over the semester, we're going to have more instructors, more administrators, folks like that you're going to be running into as well. Sitting next to me is Alex. I'm going to let him talk about who he is.
So I'm Alex Cutsinger. I am an electrical engineering student through University of Arkansas in Fayetteville on the UAFS campus. I'm also a mathematics student studying under Dr. Rigsby and all of those math professors. Majoring in both just because it's fun. That's pretty much it.
Wow. So Alex is one of those students that willingly goes after 2 of the harder majors that you could possibly even pursue. And not only is he doing them both, he's doing them at the same time. So God love you. God love you. Where we want to start is just kind of having this conversation about who we are more in depth. So you listed off that alphabet soup of a title that was, you put it into terms, who you are, what you actually do on a practical day-to-day basis here at UAFS.
Well, I'm a professor. I teach, electronics technology. Very, very familiar with Alex, too, because the electrical engineering, a lot of my students, when I first meet them, are high school students. They're coming out of the Western Arkansas Technical Center program we have on campus. So I get to meet a lot of high school students. In fact, I have high school students every semester, and then they hopefully move on and come into the college and be able to take the rest of their classes on campus. I teach electronics technology, but I also teach a new robotics technology courses that we have. I've got high school students and college students right now taking my classes this semester. And I also got into sustainable technology about 5 or 6 years ago through the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. They asked me to be a pilot study down here at the University of Arkansas Fort Smith for green energy. And so I teach out of a conservation house here on campus, and I teach about solar PV, wind technology, and things like that.
Gotcha. Are y'all actually connected with the solar boat races that are up in Fayetteville as well? Is that part of that?
No, we're not, but I'm familiar with those. But right now, what I'm mostly associated with, if anything at all, here on campus is the best robotics competition, which we involve both junior high and high school students at as well. So.
Right, and that's Alex. You also have some experience in that, right?
I do. I was in my senior year in high school. I was on our homeschool best robotics team. Super fun. Actually, since then, I've been able to referee and volunteer helping at best. It's a really great volunteer opportunity. It looks good on the resume. It's if you want to come and volunteer at one of the competitions or just come and watch, it's actually a really good opportunity.
Yeah. So it's not battle bots. No. We're not talking about like destroying somebody else's creation, but hey, it's cool nonetheless. So John, tell us, how did you get to the point where you are now here on UAFS with all these other responsibilities, like career-wise? What led you to the path where you are right now in 2018?
Well, I started my career in the United States Air Force. I actually went away to Lackland Air Force Base right after high school, and went into the military and for 4 years of active duty. And when I was in the military, it's so funny, I'm from New Jersey. I'm not from Arkansas. And I went into the military to learn electronics, and they asked me to be a Titan II missile repair person. Right. And so they used to have Titan II missiles here in the state of Arkansas. So that's how I came to the state of Arkansas. And I actually lived here for about a year or so, and then moved away to Alaska for a year, and came back again to Tennessee and Memphis, and the company I worked for said, we're going to move you to Fort Smith, Arkansas. I said, where's that? And I said, the other side of the state. And the first person I met when I walked in the door was my wife at the business building I worked in, too. So I've been here ever since.
Another story for another day with how you met your wife, but can you tell us where the Titan II missiles were?
Oh, yes. They're
Actually, you can.
yes, I can. But, of course, all those sites are still there. They actually sold those complexes to individuals and people because that's, of course, all of those were 10 stories underground. So it's kind of interesting place to work.
Rock on. So what was that transition like going from the military, from the Air Force, coming into the academic world, into academia? Like, how did you go from being an officer and doing everything that you did to teaching college students?
Actually, I didn't get into the military. I didn't get back into the military after I moved here to Fort Smith. I worked for that company that moved me here. It was Dictaphone Corporation was the name of the company. But I always wanted to get into healthcare. So one day I just walked down the street to Mercy Hospital, the old Mercy Hospital downtown, and I walked in the door and I said, I want a job. And the director of the facilities there came, invited me into his office and talked to me for a while, and he hired me on the spot, and I started working for Mercy Hospital. I worked for them for over 22 years. Ended up having his job after he retired. I was the director of facilities for about 4 or 5 years. Left Mercy, went to Holt Crock Clinic for just about 3 years, and while I was at Holt Crock Clinic, the whole time I was at Mercy and Holt Crock Clinic, I was the advisory chair for the electronics department here at UA Fort Smith, because when I came back out of the military, I went to UAFS to get my associate's degree in electronics technology, and they asked me to be on the advisory committee, and they knew about me, so they asked me, why don't you come here and teach on campus? And I said, I thought about it a while, and I said, and I prayed about it, and I said, this is what I think I want to do, and in the second half of my life. So I've been doing that for about 20 years.
So this is the second or third career for you in that regard.
Basically.
Too easy. So the lesson here, college students, is just go ask for a job, and they give it to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how it still works?
Yeah.
Now, so as an instructor, as someone who works with college students, at the end of the day, you do a lot of observation. It's not just testing. It's not just teaching. Like, you get to observe and see where students are growing, where they're failing in areas. So from your perspective, what is the greatest struggle that you observe in college students, inside the class, outside the class? What's the greatest struggle that you actually observe with them?
Well, I think probably the greatest struggle, which is a heartbreaker for me lots of times, is the financial struggles they have. A lot of my students, most of the time, are trying to pay their way through college themselves. And I'm a big believer in teaching financial planning. We actually teach it on campus, and I like Dave Ramsey's method of doing that. He's harsh sometimes, but, sometimes we have to be harsh with finances. But students so much times get themselves into trouble with loans, and it breaks my heart when they do that. I always I preach to them a little bit, try to keep them off of getting loans, but try to use other methods. But that's one of the things I see. I really feel bad for them on the financial struggles, because even though UA Fort Smith is affordable, it's probably one of the most affordable places to go, it's still a lot of money. Think about it. You have all other kinds of obligations, especially if you're married and you have children too, and you're trying to go back to school.
Right. And so just to state the obvious there, financial struggles are going to affect everything that goes on within the classroom.
Yes, it is, because they're thinking about it all the time.
Rock on. I get that. Alex, what about you? What about from your perspective? What do you observe as the greatest struggle?
So what I have noticed for myself and for a lot of my classmates is prioritizing things.
Right.
What takes priority here? Yeah, I've got family at home, and I have to be part of the family, but I also have school obligations. I've got church obligations. I've got things in all different places. Plus, I have hobbies. I'm like, how do I balance everything and keep one thing from taking over and still devote all the time I need to the different aspects of my life? It's not easy.
Yeah. Good.
So I think from that, just time management, prioritizing properly, like that can get you in a lot of hot water, and then that's just it's like this accumulative effect. If you mess up one thing, and now you got to put 2 other things on the back burner for the next week. Right. Then when those come due, you're doing 2 things instead of the one, and it just snowballs on you. So let's not be all doom and gloom. What is the number one factor for student success then? Whenever you see students who are succeeding in life, in academics, in your classroom, what's the number one factor that you see and you could point to and say that is the reason why they are doing well?
I think it's commitment. You can see that my best students are committed. They know that this is not just all fun and games. This is important because this is going to be their life career, and they want to do the best they can. And I think that, and he brought up one point, Alex brought up a good point, and I was going to talk about it too. Life needs to have balance. There's all kinds of things in life that that are pulling us different ways. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it's a struggle physically. Sometimes it's a struggle emotionally. Sometimes it's a struggle spiritually as well. So we have all those things pulling at us all the time. And I think the best way to live life is to live it in balance, where we're at peace with everything we're trying to do at the same time. Yeah, we know we're going to have struggles, and yeah, it is going to be hectic. But still, if we can try to move towards that balance in our lives, I think in the long run we'll be a much happier person.
I would agree with that. One of the other things that I've noticed, yes, commitment, motivation. When I came and started here, I knew I want to be an electrical engineer because I saw my dad, who was an electrical engineer. I knew what he did. Going into it, a lot of my classmates had no idea what engineering was, and they didn't stick with it. The ones that have so far kind of have realized, oh, this is what engineering is. And I'm sure that doesn't just apply to engineering. I'm sure that goes for all the other disciplines as well. Yeah. So just kind of knowing where you're going is a good thing to have.
Good point. Very good point.
So since we are collegiate ministry, we are concerned with people's spiritual lives and not just their academic success. Do you feel like there needs to be a nuance into how we explain where you see Christians, the students that you know that happen to be Christians, and where you see factors for success or failure for them? Is that nuanced from just the general population of students at college? And then is
Not really. I think we as Christians have the same problems as non-Christians do, as far as financial issues or commitment or prioritizing, setting goals. Setting goals in our lives, but goals that are achievable, not goals that are so far-fetched that there's no way we'll ever reach it. Then we become frustrated, and we ruin actually our Christian walk and our Christian witness to other people. People are always looking at you as a Christian, probably even more so, looking for an opportunity to find you messing up, and guess what? We are messed up. We're all messed up. And that's the reason why, that's why we have a Lord and Savior that takes care of that messed up stuff inside of us. But we as Christians, or even if you're a non-Christian, our lifestyle, our commitment, our walk, that's what speaks to other people. They see that and they say, oh, there's something different about that person. I wonder why they're always smiling. They're always kind of happy about things that are going on, even though things are going tough.
So two things on that. You said, why are they always smiling? I actually had a friend of mine who was a Christian ask me one day, why are you always smiling? I had to tell him, I got no reason not to smile. And then for the other, being able to, I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm sure it was excellent.
Could be. Repeat the question.
What is nuance between Christian students' success and failure and just general?
Yes. So I think maybe the biggest difference is not the fact that we fail or don't, but because we're Christians, we don't have any problem acknowledging, yeah, we mess up. Mm-hmm. I'm that kid in class. They're always asking me, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? And, I'm like, I think this way, but I could be wrong. And then they gawk and are like shocked. Wait, you messed up. That's not right. I'm like, I said I don't know. So, in my class, there are some Christians, some not. And maybe the distinguishing factor is the ones that are Christians don't have any problem saying, they don't have a problem asking for help. But the ones that do, or the ones that don't ask for help, the ones that aren't Christians, it's hard. It's hard for them to say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to add to that, John?
Well, yeah, and I agree. That's probably one of the ups we have in life as being a Christian. Lots of times is that we know that we're sinners saved by grace, basically, and we know that the things that we do in life, they are going to be difficult sometimes, and we are going to mess up. But we can just say, all right, I messed up, and let's move on to the next step, and let's keep on moving on. So I do agree. I agree that we have probably maybe a little bit of an advantage, and maybe that's something they see that they like and they want to talk to us about, and that way we can earn their respect to see how we can help them with their lives as well.
Awesome. So since everything that we do as Christians is informed by the fact that we are Christians, right? We don't just go live as a college student today or as an instructor today and then something else tomorrow. Like, we're a Christian nonstop. So in that vein, John, tell us about how you became a Christian, what your experience with church life is, like how you came to faith. What was that like for you?
I started off my life as a Catholic, and I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. Member of the Catholic Church in my hometown of South Orange, New Jersey. I actually was an altar boy in the Catholic Church. And in fact, at one time in my life when I was in grammar school, I had seriously considered going off to the priesthood to become a priest. But when I went into the military right after high school, and I got away from home a little bit and got away from the normalcy of life, the routine things, I was still a member of the Catholic Church. In fact, that was back when the Catholic Church started their folk masses, and I would play guitar and sing in church and things like that for folk mass. But when I came here to Fort Smith, that first person I met, which was my wife, we started dating just a little while after that, and she invited me to her church here in Fort Smith, Grand Avenue Baptist Church. And when I started going to the church there, Pastor Don Moore was the pastor at the time, and I just listened to what he had to say. I never, ever, as a Catholic, really read the Bible. We just didn't do that. I read catechism. I knew catechism back and forward, upside down. I knew all the answers, but I never knew my own thoughts about why things are. And sometimes even at night as a kid, I would think about, am I really going to go to heaven when I die? Is that going to happen? So when I started going to church with her and listening to what Brother Don had to say, then we had Sam Cathy come in, an evangelistic preacher, and I listened to what he had to say, and I realized there was something missing in my life. So I walked down the aisle one Sunday morning, and I asked Brother Don, I need help. I need to come to the realization that I have Jesus in my heart and know that for sure. And that's when I was saved.
And what year was that? When was that?
Oh, that was early on, and right before we got married. So that was about 1974, somewhere around there.
All right. And then you spent the next 40 years bouncing around church to church here in Fort Smith, right?
No, I've been at Grand Avenue Baptist Church ever since.
And how long have you been playing guitar there at Grand?
I've been in the church praise band probably for about 10 years or more, yeah.
Right. And so what I love just hearing that story is that there's just this notion of faithfulness, not only just being plugged in at the church and just being a member for as long as you have, but also that faithfulness of serving for 10 years at this point. That's encouraging for me to hear. Alex, what about you?
So I grew up at First Baptist. Been going there since 9 months before I was born. I went to church, did all the things, children's church, all of that. I was about 5 or 6, and I think I had made Mom mad, and she asked me, "Where are you going when you die?" And it's just kind of, the question stuck with me at age 5 or 6. I'm like, I don't know. And so I got to thinking about it, and I realized, you know what? Whatever it is that I have to do to make sure I go to heaven is probably worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that there was ever a moment that I went, oh, I am just dead. But I realized, God loves me. I can't be with him right now, but he's taken care of that for me. I need to live in light of that and receive God's gift for me. Since then, I've still been going to First Baptist. I was baptized in 7th grade, 8th grade. I can't remember.
So like 4 years ago.
Yeah. I help in the preschool ministry there. I've played piano for the offertory every now and again. It's been a while. But yeah, help in the library, just various things at church.
And so, as we've already kind of alluded to, we as Christians, like, the most important part of who we are is not that we are an instructor or a student or a campus minister or whatever the case may be. It's that we are a Christian first. But there are practical implications for where those two worlds kind of intersect. Mm-hmm. So, John, for you, how does that work itself out as someone who is in the academic world, as someone who is surrounded by, and maybe not so much at this institution, but at others for sure, the case is that typically the instructors there are far more left-leaning, either politically, philosophically, however, but I'm sure there's an interesting intersection there for you as being a believer in Jesus while also being instructor. So where does that intersection really kind of take you day to day?
I think day to day, what I always try to remember is the life that I live day to day is always being looked at, or under a microscope being looked at. And so basically, I try to smile, and I try to show my students that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And even when I teach class, I try to be enthusiastic, engaged with them. I try to set a good example, and also try to be a positive influence. I feel like being a positive influence speaks much, much more volumes than anything else I can say or do. Do I talk about my Christian faith? Only if I'm asked. I don't push it on anyone. I try to earn the right to speak to them if they want to listen to it. And I treat my students the same way, faculty members the same way. And I just feel like that the way you live your life should be a reflection of what actually is happening in your heart. Like so many people say, what's inside your heart is going to eventually come out of your mouth. So you got to, you need to be aware of that and cognizant of that. Am I perfect? No. Have I made mistakes? Yes. Will I still make mistakes? Yes. But you know what? I'll be forgiven, and I can ask for forgiveness, and I can move on.
So Alex, you talked about with Christians that you see that are successful academically, a lot of times it's just this vulnerability. They're willing to admit that they don't know. They're willing to admit that they're not good at something. And I would even to assume you would say that they're willing to ask for help with that. So clearly there's one intersection, but where else do you see the fact that you are a student and you are a Christian, or more importantly, you are a Christian who happens to be a student? Where do you see those two things intersecting?
So academic honesty is a thing. And as a Christian, you can't take part in that. And there are lines that you can push as a student. You're like, sure, they got the answer manual online. Yes, they do. And yes, you can get it, but should you? That's sometimes, you use it as a study guide. You do your homework, and then you double check yourself. Is that okay? Check your convictions, check the scripture. And then for sure, I'll just check it and take the answers and copy them down and hand it in. There's nothing right about that. So yeah, that's one of the things that as a Christian you have to be careful of.
Yeah, good.
How do you handle as an instructor whenever you see that going on in a class? I don't know if you even have that, availability for students actually having the manual at this, available to them. But how do you walk through that just with an individual basis of a student? How would you approach confronting and then correcting that?
Basically,
given that you are a Christian who wants to demonstrate properly.
Basically, you can ask questions about, where did you get this information? What do you think about how you got the information, and questions like that. Not maybe accusatory questions, but more of quizzing questions to find out what's going on. When I manage people for all the time, I manage people in healthcare and working in that environment. I had lots of people working for me, and so one of the things I always told people, you can cheat on a lot of things, and I may catch you, I may not catch you, but God will always catch you. And the thing is that I never had to fire a person in my whole time I was a manager. Usually those people fired themselves. Basically, they did things that would get them into the point. In fact, I had people in my office sometimes. I would ask them, "What do you think I should do?" "I think you should fire me." I said, "Well, I think you're probably right." Things in with a student, I've never had to discipline a student for cheating or anything like that. I usually just ask students, if you cheat, who are you cheating? You're not cheating me.
Right.
You're cheating yourself. You're not gaining the knowledge or the information that you need to do this in real life. If you really want to do this job in life, are you going to cheat all the time? Sooner or later, that's going to catch up to you, and you may not have the job. And so think about the implications of doing that.
Absolutely. So as we're talking through these implications of where these two major facets of our lives as college students, as instructors, people who are in the career field of their choice, clearly there's implications for how you conduct yourself as a Christian. But I want to ask John, I want to ask you this very simple question that is one that I feel like a lot of preachers, a lot of pastors, a lot of ministers want to try to speak to. that is important, but sometimes it's difficult to kind of put individual details to of how to do so. Here's the question. How can a college student presently advance the kingdom of God on a college campus?
I think what they can do, probably more than anything else, is just be a positive example to other people. The things that they do in their daily walk, the stories they tell, the jokes that they tell, the conversations they have, are all speaking about what's inside their heart. And does Christians have fun? Yes, they do. Yeah, I have fun all the time. But there's different kinds of fun. And the thing is that setting a good example speaks volumes to people, because they see that there's something different about your walk. And they're wondering to themselves, what's different about that student that I don't see? And I see that in students myself. I admire students as a professor when I see them doing things for other students, helping them. And in my classroom, we do a lot of labs. And I know there's some students that are struggling, and it's always enjoyable for me to see the good students help the poor students and not ask for anything in return. They're just doing it because they want to do it. And I know that's something that Alex does.
Yeah. Alex?
So, yes, on that note, the ones that are helping those around them, there's something different about them. They're the ones that don't have the light of Christ in them. They have no motivation and no reason, reasonably, to help somebody else without expecting something back. Another thing that I have kind of tried to use is ask questions that challenge your thinking, not pointed questions, not trying to, oh, hey, what about this hole in your logic, but things that are going to make them think things through. Because if they don't have a Bible-based worldview, there's going to be holes. Mm-hmm. So if I can help them to think things through and find their own holes, then I don't look like the bad guy. And it's possible that they'll be willing to come and ask me, hey, so how do you answer this question? Mm-hmm. I have yet for that to actually happen, but I know that I have made a few people think. And I can do that with students or with professors, with the average person on the street. It doesn't matter who it is, that strategy still works.
Good.
Yeah, so, whenever y'all were speaking, what jumps to mind for me biblically is 1 Peter 3:15 and 16. It's this idea that we like to quote it as, be ready to make a defense. Mm-hmm. And we just stop right there, which that's not actually what the verse says. The verse says is be ready to make a defense for the hope that is within you, yet do it with gentleness and respect so that you might have a clear conscience, a good conscience before God. So it's this idea that you are going to live a certain way that people are necessarily going to say, what's different? Like, why are you smiling? Like, why is it that you seem to not struggle in this area? Not that the class is easy and you're just a genius, but like life. There are certain things that you do that I just can't comprehend. And so y'all have hit on those pretty explicitly in that regard. But there is that part of 1 Peter 3:15 that says to make a defense. You do that with your life, but you also do that with your words, with an explanation. So, John, this is the one question that I feel like a lot of students have never even considered, or this possibility. Can I share the gospel with my instructor? Can I go to my professor and share the gospel clearly with them? So, can a Christian student do that? How would that actually work? In what scenario is that possible? Because if we're supposed to live the gospel with our actions and we're also supposed to tell about it, then that means that maybe we should share the gospel with our instructors. So what do you think about that?
Well, I really sincerely believe in lifestyle evangelism. In other words, the way you live, the way you act, the way you deal and interact with people is speaking a little bit about what Christ is doing inside of you. Then I like what Alex says, simply ask questions. And sometimes a simple question will open up a dialogue that you never thought would be possible. I think with anybody, even a professor, you need to earn the right, first of all, to share with them if they're willing to listen. But I always ask permission before I share with anyone. And because if they're not open to me sharing, if I'm putting them in a bad light or a bad position, how then am I going to be effective with my witness? So I need to do that. And then also just be prepared to share simply and basically what God has done for you, what Christ has done for me. Yeah, we can quote scripture, and that's great, but sometimes just telling them honestly what Christ has done for you in your life and how he's changed your life and why you smile the way you smile, that can speak volumes to them.
Gotcha. So, Alex, before you answer the question of, like, from your perspective, did you even know that that was an option, or maybe even something that you should be doing, that as a student that you should have the platform or at least the gumption that you could even share the gospel with your instructors?
That was something that I considered, because I know, professors are people too. They need Jesus as much as anybody. And I have had a couple of professors, both of them have left this campus. They're not here anymore. That I'm like, man, you're a happy guy, you're a good guy, but you need Jesus. And I, live out my faith in a way that they can see it. They never came to me and asked specifically, but I know that they suspected why I was the way I was. Actually, I don't know, Dr. Wolverton, at his going away party, they had, a couple of cards there so that the students who've had him could sign them. And I'm like, oh, yes, God bless you in the rest of your career. And then my name, just hoping, maybe he'll see that and think, maybe that's something I should think about. He was notorious for kind of giving a hard time to the preachers standing out in the campus center, just kind of being kind of harassing them. But he looked at me different than the rest of the students, not because I'm better, but because I was different, and I was an example of something that he hadn't seen before.
Gotcha. So I think that just a lot of times, Christian college students just don't even have this understanding that that's something that's even available to them, and it's kind of mind-boggling to me because as a student, you spend however many hours a week with one person in front of you. Now, yeah, I mean, granted, it's in a classroom setting, but what goes into being able to share the gospel in that regard? So one thing you said, John, is that building up to the right to be able to share. So explicitly, what would be the things that would be necessary if a student is going to be able to share? They ask for permission, but to get to that point to actually share the gospel with someone, what would really be necessary at a practical level as a student coming to an instructor?
Well, I think first of all, it needs to be one-on-one. It doesn't need to be in front of a bunch of people, which would tend to embarrass that person, and you don't want to do that because that's all of a sudden you're alienated that relationship. But I think the way you earn that is being respectful of that person's position, because they are the instructor. They are sort of like in charge of that class. Showing them that you're willing to do the work, you're committed, you have goals, and you do good work, and you try your best. That speaks volumes to them as well. And then to know that they have office hours. You could always ask, if I could I come see you and just to talk, and maybe after talking a couple of times and just getting to know each other, you have the opportunity where they may even ask you a question. What do you do? Why are you the way you are? Why are you happy? What what's your walk in life? And you may lead up to that, but in no way forcing yourself on them. Of course, that won't work.
Right.
But in fact, that'll probably give you get you in trouble right away. But to earn that right by becoming a friend and becoming a person that they know that they can trust, that when I say something to them, that's not going to be heard all over campus or something like that. And so the respect that you have for that person as well.
Well, with that being said, why do you think it is that students don't do this more often? What's the thing that holds them back more than anything?
Fear.
Is it just the fear of what?
I think fear.
That they are an authority and they're worried about their grade? Is that the main thing in your mind?
Yeah, fear possibly, and knowing that this is a public institution, okay, which, there are limitations of what you can and cannot do. So I think fear is part of it, but also maybe being a little bit self-conscious and not confident enough, and we're all afraid to do it. But it's so funny. We're afraid to do it, but we can go talk about other things and feel perfectly comfortable about it. Talk about a ball game or a football player or whatever. But we don't want to talk about Jesus, and Jesus is the author of our life. So to being able to talk about who put us here in the first place would be a good way to go through it. Some classes lend themselves easier to it. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about things that lend themselves to history and things like that, things like this can come up. I teach robotics, but you can talk about it in robotics. Think about it. This robotics is artificial intelligence, but you don't have artificial intelligence. What makes you different? You can talk about things, and so just way open it up.
I would agree with all of that. I would add to that, though, stress potentially. As you're in a classroom setting, you have school stuff to do too.
Right.
Maybe sharing the gospel is not the first thing on your mind. Not that it shouldn't be, but at times it's not. And on your robotics note, yes, you have the artificial intelligence side. You also have the ethics side that you can approach that from.
Exactly.
That applies in engineering too.
Gotcha. So with that being said, I do want to key in on that, for anyone who may be listening or watching this, yes, absolutely. I was a history major, and so I even took classes that were special topics courses on Jesus and Paul. I took a class on the history of Christianity. So yeah, those things come up more frequently.
Right.
However, I would approach it in the same way of saying, what are the things that I have to do in order to be able to earn that right to share the gospel? One, you got to know your instructor. So if you are a student, the only time you show up in your instructor's office hours is if you're in a huge bind. That shouldn't be the only time you ever show up. Go talk with these men and women. They might be Christians, they might not. And guess what? They might be, and that might be a great connection for you to make. Not that that's going to earn you any kind of privilege, but it's just something that's encouraging in that regard. So one, you've got to know them, have a little bit of a relationship. And then also you got to be a student that's not a garbage student. That doesn't mean you got to be straight A's, I don't think. But right. I think it means you've got to do your best, right? And so as an instructor, as well as anyone, you can tell when someone is just doing their absolute dead level best, and it might be a B. That might be what they're getting, but are you satisfied with that effort from them?
Right.
So if we combine this idea of having a somewhat of a genuine relationship that's not just an instructor standing lecturing while you take notes, go beyond that, have good work ethic, have good results as best as you can define that with your effort, then it's just a matter of seeking those opportunities in my mind. For me, as a history major, it was a whole lot easier to go share the gospel with a lady named Linda Kuhn, who was the chair of the history department. Shared with her on more than one occasion, but what I can also say is that I had shared with her in her office before I took the last class I took with her, and that was the history of Christianity, and there were more than a dozen times or so I can think of where she literally gave me the floor to respond to something that she was teaching on in a class of 30 people.
Wow.
And that never would have happened if I wouldn't have ever even had the thought, hey, I should share the gospel with her. So I would just encourage anyone who's listening or watching that this is something that is in fact practical. That intersection of being a Christian and a student, a Christian and an instructor, these things are important. So on that note, what other final advice would you give for Christian students seeking academic success, seeking success here at UAFS or anywhere else? What would be the thing that you would want them to hear as the final word from you?
I think the final word would be is that commit your life to what you feel is important for now and for the future, and to seek out and define on your own what is God all about. There's questions. Everybody has questions. Yeah, even atheists and agnostics have questions about God. But seek that question out. Ask that question. Find out what God means to you, and then how can I intertwine God and my life goals together, and see that there will be a way to reach the things that I want to reach. And those things that I want to reach in my life are very, very profitable, very, very worthwhile things. But doing it alone and doing it in isolation may not be the way to go. And the thing is, the more we want to try to reach out to people, be social with people, the more the topics of Christianity are going to come up, because people are going to ask questions if you are different. One other thing I would say, too, is that students come into my class, I converse with them before class starts. I get there early on purpose for us just to talk. And students know they can confide in me and tell me things that are going on in their lives that they have problems with, and they know that I will pray for them because I tell them so. And I ask about those things over and over again. How's your wife doing? How's your children doing? What's going on? People appreciate that. And it's not, you're not putting a burden on them, and you're not putting them in a bad position. What you're doing is you're opening yourself up, saying, I'm available if you want to talk. And I think we have to be approachable. And students can do the same thing with a professor. They can just be approachable.
I'd agree with that. You hit on it at the beginning of what you were just saying. Keep an eternal perspective. If you keep eternity in perspective, then everything else it makes more sense.
Right.
Whether that's building relationships with your professors, okay, so I go to their office, it takes me 10 minutes out of my day. Well, in eternity, that's nothing. Maybe some final advice in building relationships with your professors. A lot of professors will let you contest grades. I would say as a Christian, don't do that. I have never done that. I had one test that I didn't agree with the grade, but I went to the professor and I said, okay, I'm not here to contest the grades. What I'm here to do is I want to know, why did these points get allotted this way, and what can I do so that next time the point allotment is more like what I want it to be. I have, to this day, a great relationship with that professor. But, keeping eternity in perspective, if I had gone saying, hey, I don't agree with this, and that would make sense in a short-term perspective. But if I keep eternity in mind, going, okay, I want to make it better next time, makes way more sense, and it keeps me in good standing with that professor.
Good.
Well, John, I appreciate you being here and sharing just your story and just your experience with here as an instructor. I'm glad that you were the first one that we were interviewing, just to kind of set the tone here, and I really appreciate that. Alex, thank you for being here. So at the end of the day, what we would say is that be approachable, do good work, be whatever your convictions are, wherever they lie, be there. Wherever you are, be there. And I think that's just really important, no matter what area of life we're talking about with being a Christian, intersecting with what other aspect of your life would be. So on that note, I thank y'all for being here. I appreciate y'all listening and appreciate y'all hearing and watching the content that we have here. And so we're going to end like we always do with what basically is a benediction. So do good and don't sin.